Hi there, welcome and thank you for joining us today for our Progress Semaphore webinar, Data Harmonization for Better Business Decisions. My name is Philip Miller. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Progress, looking after not only Semaphore, but MarkLogic and a lot of other R technologies in the Progress data stack. Joining us today will be Stephen Reed and Jim Morris from our Semaphore team, both of which are very experienced in using Semaphore to solve some really key critical challenges within business and also looking at opportunities and ways to leverage data in context better. So without further ado, I will hand you across to Stephen.
Phil, thanks so much for that introduction. Again, my name is Stephen Reed. I'm a senior account manager here with Progress Software. And I wanted to start today's session actually with a question. And the question's this: how do you know if you have a data analytics problem? And I'll give you an example because I've lived through this once or twice before in my time. Let's say you were called into a meeting by your boss, and your boss said, "We have a problem." And just for the sake of an example, let's say your boss says, "Hey, we've got a problem with sales. Why are sales down?" And the conversation in the room goes something like this. The first person says, "Well, I think our sales are down because of insert reason here." And the next person in the room says, "Well, I think sales are down because of another reason." And the third person says, "Well, I think sales are down because of yet another reason." Well, let me tell you something. If that's the conversation that's going on in your room, my suggestion is stop, because you've got a data analytics problem. The reason you have a data analytics problem is because everyone is saying, "I think." If you want to make smart business decisions, you have to be able to say, "I know." We need statements like, "I know my sales figures are down because I see some softness in the European market, and I've got the data to back that up. Now I can make a good business decision." And that knowing is what really is driving the ability for us to do good things and to make smart business decisions. And that's what today's webinar is all about. So the first thing we're going to be talking about during our webinar is really some more of that problem space. What are the issues that we're seeing behind data analysis? And we're really going to have I'll say a spin on that, looking at the unstructured part of the problem. I like to call that 300-pound beast that's in the corner of the room that everyone is ignoring, yet it's such a big part of data analytics. Once we kind of understand the problem space, we're going to talk about how data harmonization can actually help fix that problem, and how it can align with both your data and your analytics strategy, and how it can potentially be used for other applications as well. I'll then be turning things over to Jim, who will be providing us with a demonstration, some data harmonization, and then finally we'll wrap with a Q&A period. So let's kind of get into our first example here. Let's say I've got my data set here, and it's in nice, neat rows and columns, and it clearly identifies my state of jurisdiction and market capitalization for some various publicly traded company. And I wanted to be able to answer the question, I want to know all companies that are incorporated in the state of Delaware with a market cap over $10 billion. Well, if my data looks like this, that's a pretty straightforward question to be able to answer. But what if my data looks like this? What if the market capitalization figures aren't quite as neat and tidy as I'd like them to be? Okay, I can probably run some macros or do some kind of data transformations and get this in a format that I'm more used to. But then what if my data is like this? What if it's a bunch of PDF documents and the state of jurisdiction and the market capitalization values are buried inside these PDF documents? Now, for the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to make the assumption that these are just PDF documents. There aren't any XML or more data behind them to support analysis. It's really just raw PDF documents, raw Microsoft Word documents that I'm working with. If I wanted to be able to answer these questions about state of jurisdiction and market capitalization, and all I have are these PDF documents, what would I have to do? Well, I'd have to go into each document. Oh, there's 50 states in a union. Yeah, it's probably going to be on the first page. I can probably pull off that pretty easy, and maybe I can figure out how to do that. So okay, I think I can solve that problem. But then what about market capitalization? Well, if I just do a search on market capitalization, this sample document, there's no hits. It's not in this document. Well, It's just not being expressed as market capitalization. So I don't have an easy way of finding this information. So what do I have to do now? Well, now I got to open every document, go through it, figure out how market capitalization is actually expressed in this document, and then pull that out. But honestly, that's just part of the problem that we have with unstructured data. Yes, it's in different formats, but then I also have the challenge of when I try to link data repositories together, both structured and unstructured, or multiple structured repositories, or multiple unstructured repositories, I don't always have a common language to talk about them. And even if I did have a common language to talk about them, I may realize that I might have very sensitive data in there, but I don't have an easy way of identifying it. I might know a social security number is a piece of PII, but if I don't have an easy way to identify it or tag it, it doesn't really do me a lot of good. And then finally, whether it's just simple through organic growth of your company or you're doing mergers and acquisitions, the number of data systems and data silos that you have just keep growing exponentially over time. But yet there's just one more thing we have to worry about too. It is the rapid expansion of data that we're seeing. So this is really, the first time I heard this statistic, it really took me back a little bit. But the recent analysis is there's something between 200 and 300 millions of terabytes of new data being created daily. That's a lot of data. Just to put that in some amount of context, that's roughly equal to either 100 billion books or about 40 billion movies being created on a daily basis. And what's even more frightening is a large majority of that data is unstructured. Yet most organizations are just using a very, very small fraction of that to figure out good business decisions because they're relying on their structured data repositories only. So the ultimate question then becomes, how do I know if I am making good business decisions? Well, we've got some good news. If you're familiar with any or all of those problems, a great way of addressing all of them is through data harmonization with the Semaphore platform. Now, Semaphore has a lot of different use cases to it. It has a modeling component, a classification, and an integration component. We're not going to be looking at everything that Semaphore can do today, as we're really just going to be focused on the data analytics capabilities, use cases around Semaphore. We will have other webinars in the future about other use cases with Semaphore, but today we're just really going to be focusing on the data analytics. So how would this work? How would we be able to get a better harmonized data story using Semaphore? Well, there's a couple important things to think about or remember when we're implementing Semaphore inside of an organization. One is you can kind of think of it as a middleware. Sitting between your data repositories and your applications. It kind of provides a translation service, if you will, between data speak and business speak. But at a very high level, Semaphore provides these three services to your data. It provides an enrichment service, a data extraction service, and a data harmonization service. So I'm going to talk about each of those here briefly. First, the data enrichment service. This is our ability for Semaphore to read a piece of content, structured or unstructured, document, PDF, we don't care, and be able to provide a set of metadata tags to it, meaning we can identify what this data item is about and provide a very consistent label to that data. We can then do basically the kind of the opposite function. We can look at a piece of document and extract facts out of that. States of jurisdiction, market capitalization values, people, names. If you can describe the thing that you want to extract, we can take that out of the document and surface that for better analytics. So that's great. And you just saw kind of an example of what we can do with like a PDF document. But now if I have multiple data repositories, what I really need to be able to do is to harmonize that data across both my structured and unstructured data sets. So we like to contrast data harmonization to data normalization, which you might be more familiar with. So typically data normalization kind of looks like this. You're launching a new application. That application is expecting a certain set of data to be available to it, kind of in a certain particular way, maybe certain formats. So what do? Well, we go to various data repositories, we extract data out of those data repositories, we do some type of transformation function, and then we load it into another data repository, and that is the data set that my new application uses. Well, that's great when I have 2 data repositories and 5 applications I'm supporting. What happens when I have 100 data repositories and 1,000 applications I'm trying to support? That doesn't scale very well. So our position is don't normalize your data, harmonize it. Leave it in its system of record and allow Semaphore to provide a translation layer between the underlying data and the applications that want to use that data. Now, for business and data analytics, we're primarily just going to be focused on the data extraction and data harmonization piece of Semaphore. And like I said, we'll have other webinars in the future that focus on other use cases around Semaphore. So what might this look like from an enterprise level? How can I think about data harmonization from an enterprise level? Well, if you think about a typical environment, you're going to have your data repositories here across the bottom here. You've got your structured, your databases. You've got your unstructured data like your content management systems, your SharePoints and things like that. You've got your user audience across the top. And then you have your various applications that are trying to access the data inside your data repositories. Now, the thing is, if you think about how application 1 talks to or references data repository 1, it might be completely different how it interacts with a different data repository. And I think a great example here is social security number, right? So how many ways can I represent the concept of social security number? Well, in one database, it might be referenced as EIN, employee identification number. In another database, it might be referenced as TIN, taxpayer identification number. But in my human resources file, inside a PDF document, when I filled it out the first time when I first started working, it's referenced as social space security space number followed by a set of digits, right? It's all talking about the same concept, but it's being talked about and stored in different ways in different formats. So it's very hard for applications to be able to get the right bit of information. In kind of the semantic world, when you use Semaphore, kind of that all goes away, right? So now I can provide basically a translation layer between my applications and my underlying data repositories to be able to speak in concepts. So now I can talk about the concept of social security number. So an application might do something like this. It might say, hey, I need the concept of social security number from database 123. Well, in database 123, it's really stored as TIN. But the calling application doesn't need to know that. It just needs to work into the realm of concepts. And this is also great for my user community because that's how users think. Users don't think about SQL statements. They think about concepts, social security numbers, part numbers, invoice statements, things like that. That's how your users think. So not only does it make it easier to develop the applications, it also makes it easier to elicit requirements and translate those requirements from your user community to the application to drive even better business value. And what's more important is that same level of business speak is exactly what the C-suite is talking about too. They're using that same language, that concept language. They're not talking about rows and columns and things like that. They are talking about in the world of concepts. And now I have the ability to give my C-suite the single view of all my data, and it's in the language that they understand. So data harmonization can be used for a lot of different use cases as well too. Today we are focused on doing it for data analytics, but really data harmonization applies to a lot of different things. It can also be used to develop enterprise knowledge graphs. It could also be used for semantic search and discovery. Your content management systems, your enterprise search systems, if you're finding it hard to find things in those databases, you can use data harmonization for that as well too. And then finally, data harmonization can also be used for your machine learning and AI initiatives as well. There's a lot of different industries that can benefit from data harmonization. These are just representative samples of some various industries we've worked with throughout the years. But people have asked me, hey, Stephen, how do I know if my company is right for data harmonization? Like, what's really a good litmus test to use? And here's what I tell them. If you've got a lot of data in your organization and you have a very specific language that you use to talk about that data, you probably need a good data harmonization strategy. Think about healthcare. The last time you received an explanation of benefits, you opened it up. Did all those codes make sense to you? What about the last financial services statement you might have gotten? Did you understand everything that was going on in there? I've been at companies before where they literally had 3 layers of acronyms to describe something. They had an acronym to describe an acronym to describe an acronym. If that's your business, I guarantee you need a data harmonization strategy because you have a lot of data and you've got a very highly controlled vocabulary about how you describe and talk about that data. So I know a lot of you today are probably very familiar with Progress. I know a lot of you today might be very familiar with Semaphore, but I thought it might be good to kind of introduce a little bit of both. So Progress Software was founded in 1981. It's publicly traded on NASDAQ. Semaphore was founded in 2006 and was subsequently acquired by Progress just this past year in 2023. But really the most important thing on the screen here today is that Semaphore, for the 3rd consecutive year in a row, has been named by Software Reviews as the leader in metadata management solutions. If you have not already, really encourage you to go out to the Infotech website, download the Data Quadrant report, and see what other customers are saying about Semaphore. So with that, I'm going to be turning things over to Jim for a little demonstration of how we can start harmonizing your data and turning unstructured data into structured. Jim, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. Again, my name is Jim Morris. I've been working with Semaphore for about 9.5 years. Before that, I spent most of my career in kind of life sciences R&D functions and either some information management function, library, informatics, etc. So when I came to work with Semaphore, I mainly focus on those particular types of industries, research, data-focused organizations, and to help them understand what Semaphore can do for them. So in this demonstration, we're going to be addressing some of the issues that Stephen brought up earlier about trying to solve business analytics problems that require information that's held in documents and needs to be extracted from documents in order to make a full assessment of a business problem. So for example, the idea of doing some type of market analysis, competitive analysis, forecasting that requires looking at a bunch of companies' market capitalization and the jurisdiction in which they operate, or the state in which they were incorporated. And based on those bits of data, I may combine that with some of my structured data that I have, and I can do some more sophisticated analytics. So we're going to focus on where can we get that data that we need to complete our picture, and how Semaphore can be used to get that data out of documents. And we'll look at some other capabilities of Semaphore as we go through this. The whole idea being we're trying to generate data, and what we have instead are documents. And as Stephen said, you either have to open up each of those documents and read it, or just manually create the data yourself. Semaphore is here to solve that type of problem. So let's look at an example. I'm going to go into a system that we created specifically to demonstrate some of this. So to show some examples of how Semaphore helps solve this problem, I'm going to log into a system that we have that is actually running on our sister database called MarkLogic. And MarkLogic is a multi-model database, can store any type of data, it can instantly index it. So it's a great tool to couple with Semaphore, because Semaphore generates data looking at full text and documents, and then needs to put that data somewhere, and MarkLogic is a perfect place for it. So you can see here in this system, we have a set of 10K. So these are the 10K financial reporting documents that public companies need to report in the United States. And in that data, in these documents, are data points like the market capitalization that they report for the year, as well as where they are incorporated, which is an important distinction between just where they are located. What's really important is we're looking at where they are incorporated, which gives you a different picture of how these companies are affected by regulations and locations, etc. So if I pull all my documents into MarkLogic here, into the search system, I can start to do my work. I can start to look for companies that are in a particular area of jurisdiction. So for example, if I wanted to search for companies that are headquartered in Michigan, maybe I'll go up here in the search box up here and search for Michigan, and I get back 3 results. And I say, oh, all right, well, I guess I'll have to open up each one of these, hunt through it, find the market capitalization, and then cut and paste that into a database and blah, blah, blah. Imagine if you have, hundreds of documents. That doesn't make sense. For example, what if I search for California? Well, I get back probably most of the documents because they all refer to California somewhere, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the jurisdiction of California. And that's actually fairly uncommon to be incorporated in California. So what can we do about this? We bring Semaphore into the picture. Semaphore is able to look at these documents, and based on specific configurations that we put into Semaphore, we are extracting the data points that we need. And I think that's an important point to bring out, that Semaphore can just get the data that you need to solve the problem that you have. You don't need to build, a data fabric of every data point you could possibly imagine in case you ever need it. The idea of Semaphore is you say, what data do I need? Where is that data? Is it semi-structured, structured, unstructured? And how can Semaphore help to look at that data and make decisions so it can be harmonized more easily with other data? So in this case, we're looking at these documents and we're extracting those specific data points. So let's look at an example of that. I'm just going to pick one in here. These are the ones that were found. So here, another just kind of a quick commercial for MarkLogic here is that MarkLogic is really powerful in that it can hold documents in multiple formats. And so, for example, we're looking at here the PDF version of this 10K. It's the whole thing, all 150 pages or whatever it is. And Semaphore has already looked at these documents. So as these documents were loaded into MarkLogic, Semaphore was called, and then Semaphore returned data. So, for example, I have a view of the PDF here. That's one view, but we also have a special view of RDF, and this is actually the format that Semaphore returned the data in is in triples, or specifically RDF, which is a graph database format. And so we return this particular representation of the triples. Semaphore can return the data in whatever format you need it in. In this case, we're using triples. Maybe it's integrating with a wider enterprise graph, and using triples makes sense. But what MarkLogic can do with that data is now it can build features into the user interface here, where I can say, well, what is the jurisdiction of this particular company we're looking at? It's Amgen, which is a pharmaceutical company located in California, but it's incorporated in Delaware. And if we look again, we can see it actually pulled out the market capitalization. As Stephen showed earlier, market capitalization might not even be a phrase that occurs in this document. So we need to look for that in very more richer ways to be able to find out specifically where this number is. And of course, there's other things here, like the name of the company. We've even pulled out some names. We may look at this later. The people that actually signed the documents. These are all the little data points that we can pull out just as examples. So now we can see we could actually look through each of these documents and bring up these data points. So that's interesting. But what we really want to do is be able to report on this information. We need to be able to pull this data into a database where it can be queried, combined with other data, and in order to do the actual analysis that we need to do. So for that, we can look at a different view of this system here. And here we just have search, which is useful. You can do keyword searching here and find documents that way. But that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to do analysis on the data that's contained in these documents. We want to turn these documents into the data we need. So we've done that with Semaphore. But now let's look at this analysis tab. So this is good. So now we can actually write queries. These are just a few sample queries we put together using the Sparkle query language, which is the standard query language for RDF triples. And then I can say, of the documents that I have here, how many companies are, how does it break out by state of jurisdiction? can see that Delaware, most of them are in Delaware, and then California and Michigan. So even though California found all those documents, only 2 of them are actually headquartered, or they may be headquartered there, but more importantly, their jurisdiction is in California. So that's interesting. So then, but we're looking for market capitalization by jurisdiction. So that gets a little more sophisticated. So if we can run this query, now we're getting back a lot more data. We're getting the company name, the market cap as a number, which is important. It may not be expressed as a number in the document, but we're returning it as a number so that we can actually do calculations on it. And the state of incorporation here. So this is all, and this is using MarkLogic as well. MarkLogic is storing the triples. MarkLogic is supporting the ability to send Sparkle queries to the data and return it in this format. The data itself, though, was created by Semaphore by analyzing those documents. So this is useful, and you can incorporate this into your search systems and provide this type of dashboard for your customers. But what else can we do with this data? So I want to take a step back and let's look in a little more detail about how Semaphore creates this data. And to do that, we're going to take a quick look at Semaphore. We're not going to look at all parts of Semaphore, but I do want to look at the tool that we use to analyze how Semaphore produces this data. And it gives you a nice peek under the covers as to the power and capabilities of this product. So I'm going to jump over to MarkLogic here. It's a MarkLogic cloud service on which Semaphore is running. And here we have the Semaphore homepage. And Semaphore is a taxonomy ontology modeling tool, as Stephen's already pointed out. And everything we did to configure what Semaphore is doing for this demonstration is done through the modeling tool. But we're going to look specifically at this classification interface, which allows us to explore how Semaphore is looking at documents. As it says here, it's a document analyzer. So let's look at one of these documents. This is just one of the 10Ks that we have out there that we were just looking at in the search system. And I'm going to put that in through for analysis. And so you see Semaphore has already looked at the document. It's presenting it on the left-hand side here. So this is what Semaphore reads from the document. Then on the right-hand side are the data results that Semaphore has produced. Again, according to precisely what we told it to do through the modeling tool. So here you see the same data points that we were seeing in that search interface. We can see that it pulls out the jurisdiction. And what's powerful here using this interface is we actually, if we just click on that, we can see where in the document that was found. So we can kind of make sure that it's doing the right thing. Maybe we need to tweak the configuration a bit to get more precise. The market capitalization, as we said earlier, that's actually a trickier thing to find because it's just expressed in a paragraph. And it could be expressed, as it is here, 36,174 billion. Well, we actually need that as a number. So as Semaphore was producing this data, it also produced it as a data point that could be used for calculations. The other stuff that's interesting here, we know we have the reporting entity, the actual company name, but just to show some advanced capabilities of Semaphore, I wanted to point out how we can pull out the actual officers from the text. So these are all each of these extractions is dealing with a particular officer that it finds. For example, let's look at this one, Jennifer Barris here. And we can see, well, where is Semaphore finding that information? Well, it's down here in this blob of text that, in this particular 10K document, it's described all the members of their board. And we're also finding things like the roles, like what is Jennifer's role? And I've noticed that it's expressed as Chief Human Resources Officer, but we want to kind of make that data more consistent. Maybe we're looking across multiple sources of information about board members. So we're returning it as CHRO. So just a little example of how we're using taxonomies or ontologies to help drive some of these extractions. Sometimes we're just looking for names, which our NLP engine is able to find. Other times we're looking for things that are driven by taxonomies. Just another peek at the NLP engine, notice when I hover over a term, Semaphore knows what these words are. It knows that this is a past tense verb. It knows that Jennifer is a proper noun. So it's already interpreted this into all this text, and that's how we're able to build. It's part of the reason why we're able to build such sophisticated rules and find the data points that we're looking for. We also often like to extract the context that this information appears in. This can be very useful for, maybe you want to review all of the officers in all the companies that you're interested in, but I don't want to have to open every document. Just give me the text that's relevant to the information I'm trying to collect. And that's what we're doing here. So just to peek at what Semaphore is able to do as one example. And you can imagine using your own documents that have data buried in them, knowing what the capabilities are, what is the data that you're missing that you could be pulling out of these documents. As I said before, Semaphore can generate this data in any number of formats. And so we saw back in that search system how we were able to pull in the data as triples. And that way we were able to do triple type queries, which is very useful. But maybe we're just trying to bring it into our BI tool, our analytics tool, our Tableau, or Excel. Well, Semaphore can generate that information too. So for example, for these same set of documents that we've been looking at, I ran a process against Semaphore to just generate tabular data that I can then use to bring into my BI tool. So in my case, I just brought it into Excel. But you can see here's that same data. Here's all my documents and all the data that's been extracted from it. You can see I've got the capitalization, and I've got the jurisdiction and all the other data points. In this case, here we have some more people being extracted. The signatories for the document are being pulled out. So a lot of data points all being brought in together at one point, in one place here. And then I can combine this with my other databases, other systems. I can use Semaphore's ability to normalize or harmonize information to say, okay, that role example, like let's make sure everybody's referring to Michigan in the same way or the vice president in the same way. So if I'm looking for all the companies in Michigan, whether it's internal data or external data, I can make sure my data will connect because I've chosen the terms to do that. But once I have this data in raw format, then I can do some of my analysis, generate charts and tables like this. It's kind of interesting. I chose Apple as one of the companies here, and Apple, of course, like blows every other company out of the water in terms of market capitalization. But because this is a dynamic table here, I can make decisions about what I want to include and get a kind of more interesting picture of companies that are maybe in the similar class. So again, this is just, once you have the data in a format that it can be used, in this case, I need it in tabular format. In another case, I might need it in XML, I might need it in RDF, I might need it in JSON. Anyway, we can produce it to be effective in whatever BI tool you happen to be using. Semaphore is there to produce it. So in summary, going back to what we've seen, we saw how Semaphore can take a document and we can say, okay, what data points do we need from these documents? And Semaphore can, even the process of loading the documents into a search system or some database, some content management system, send the documents to Semaphore. Semaphore can produce the data in whatever format it's needed. We saw it produced in triples, and then we saw it produced in a kind of an analytics dashboard so we could explore how Semaphore was performing. And then we saw it just produced as tabular data so that we can use it in standard BI tools like Excel. And without this information, we won't be able to answer the questions that we're trying to get to. And that's the kind of the core message that we want to express to you. And with that, I think it's time to turn it back to Stephen.
Great, thanks so much, Jim. So just to kind of recap some of the benefits of what we've seen and what we can do with data harmonization, really the most important thing is that ability to get the important relevant data facts out of your unstructured data repositories, and then being able to bring that together. And because I can start bringing those data sets together, I've now got the ability to eliminate the data and the metadata silos that's proliferating throughout my organization. And yet I have this other added benefit of being able to use the language that people are used to talking about my data. I don't have to turn about acronyms or things like that. I can now talk about things in the way of concepts. And this is the same speak that the boardroom is using. And then finally, because I'm able to do all this, I'm able to make better business decisions because I'm now using all my data, not just some of it, to drive what I'm trying to do. So some of you may be wondering, well, how do I start my data harmonization journey? How do I get down this path? Well, the very first thing you have to do is start defining your metadata. What does that really mean? Well, that really means those business concepts we've been talking about, you really have to be able to define them. And people often ask, well, where do I find them? Where do I start with that? Well, a lot of times, a lot of organizations already have them. Maybe they're just a spreadsheet that you maintain right now, but starting to pull all that information together and realizing where that data is a great first step in doing through data harmonization. Now that I have that, I'll say metadata space defined, I can use that to start harmonizing my information across all my data repositories with Semaphore, structured or unstructured, and that allow me to now do very interesting things from either a data analytics perspective or to integrate it with potentially other applications like enterprise search and content management systems. Well, thank you for your time today. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day to find out more about data harmonization, and I'm going to turn things back over to Phil. Phil, over to you.
Cheers, Stephen. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jim, as well for sharing that demo with us. Really interesting to see what you can achieve with Semaphore, even just in that sort of relatively simple example there. So yeah, really good. I put a link in the chat if you want to know more about Semaphore. If you've got any questions about Semaphore, then please feel free to hop across to our website and have a look there. We have now going to be joined by Stephen and Jim, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see their faces. Stephen and Jim, join us for a Q&A. Right, perfect. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for that. We've got some questions that are already coming in. We've got, let me have a look here. Assuming MarkLogic database is a mandatory requirement for Progress to work its magic on. So, so is it MarkLogic? I mean, I know it's the preferred solution, but can Semaphore be used standalone? Could it be used with other services?
Jim, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. The demo was using MarkLogic as a database, and we do that with many clients. It's as you said, if you didn't have a place to put the data, or you weren't satisfied with systems you were using, we would certainly recommend MarkLogic. We were very successful paired with them because of all the reasons I explained, that it can store. Well, there's many reasons that I can't get into, but certainly in terms of the demo, we're storing the documents, we're storing the data that Semaphore generated. We can store something I kind of left out was it's also storing the ontologies that drove the extractions. So that's where it gets into even more on the data harmonization message. That if you're using a tool like MarkLogic, you've got both the ontologies, you've got the documents, you've got the fragments of documents that may be most important to you, and you have the metadata that Semaphore has extracted or applied to or from those documents. So it's a great solution, but it's absolutely not required.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, it's like I say, it's an enterprise level solution, so it's designed to work in that environment very much so, not just at connecting to those, but also at scale.
Yes, good point.
Quick one, I think we can probably answer quite quickly, but here in Canada, we manage bilingual documents in French and English. Can this also be managed?
I'll do the one. So yeah, the short answer is yes. There are various licensing components associated with that. So out of the box, you get like one language model, but there are other languages we support, and French Canadian is one of them. So yeah, so the quick answer is yes. The longer answer is it's a licensable feature of the tool.
No worries. And I guess I can't get away from it, but can data harmonization be used to support my AI strategy?
Yeah, that we get that one a lot. So, and I assume the question is probably around like a machine learning AI strategy, you know, the ChatGPT, generative AI solutions of the world. I think the challenge that we're seeing with most clients in that space right now is how do I take that same ChatGPT-like functionality and apply it to my private data sets, right? You know, do the ChatGPT thing, but use it with my private data, right? And that basically just translates into, well, I got to give really good data to my LLM in order to provide good results. You know, it's the garbage in, garbage out story that you ubiquitously have with data. So if I want to give good, manageable, good, reliable data into my AI algorithm du jour, let's harmonize that data first. So we kind of look at Semaphore's ability for data harmonization as a preprocessor into your ML strategies so that you basically can generate better results. I think we have other webinars that focus really just around generative AI, but that's kind of the short answer to how I would leverage AI and Semaphore.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was reading a piece from Gartner around their sort of AI impact radar, and at the very center was the knowledge model as well. And obviously, very important aspect to certainly RAG solutions. And Semaphore plays an important role there, especially with the management and the creation, in some cases, of the knowledge model.
We have some excellent webinars that we've already done on that topic that we can refer you to.
Yeah, yeah, great. And then, I mean, how many documents do you need to train your models? Like, are we talking thousands? Are we talking, you know, tens? Or how are we training?
I'll take that. Well, the quick answer is zero. Semaphore models are not machine learning models in a typical sense. They're not built from massive training sets, which can be very time consuming and kind of mysterious in terms of what they produce. Semaphore is really about documenting exactly what you're trying to find and putting that control in the hands of subject matter experts. We didn't look at Semaphore models today. That wasn't the focus, but they are, they're targeted at subject matter experts, not programmers or even necessarily data scientists. But of course, none of those people are excluded from using Semaphore. But Semaphore models are intended to reflect the knowledge of those with expertise in the subject, in knowledge of the concepts that are used in the business. Now, of course, we leverage machine learning quite a bit in Semaphore. The natural language processing engine we saw a little bit of is built with machine learning methods, and of course, even in developing new models, text mining, etc. There are important parts of how Semaphore operates, but it's always about keeping the human in the loop.
Yeah,
that's the focus of Semaphore.
That's what kind of attracted me when we first took over the technology. That's what kind of like put it in my head, is kind of like mechanizing human knowledge. Putting human knowledge at machine scale. It's a really interesting subject. My VP of technology, our VP of technology, MJ, was on the webinar last week discussing sort of data citizens. So those are those subject matter experts that you're getting towards when they can start engaging with the model and making changes to impact the business using Semaphore and the team that would manage that much more easily than like I say, it being in a spreadsheet and hidden away somewhere. So yeah, it's really good. Beside the Semaphore products, are there some community projects we can take a look at? I'm guessing that's from some of the stuff that we've done with customers and things like that. We're definitely looking at those. We're going to be having a community webinar. We're going to be joined by one of our partners to share some of their stories there. But we're always looking for people to talk about how they're using Semaphore, what they want to get more out of Semaphore. Having those discussions with us is great for our community events and events like these. So if you want to speak and you want to join us, please feel free to let us know.
Yeah, I think just a little additional comment on that one is the good news about Semaphore, it's a platform. The bad news about Semaphore maybe is there's 1,000 use cases for it, right? So because it is a platform, right? So I think when you look at the things that Semaphore can do, it's really more limited by your imagination what your problems are. So sometimes it's hard to say, oh, here's the 1, 2, 3 things that Semaphore can do. Today we talked about data harmonization, but as Jim and others mentioned, there's a lot of other use cases for the technology as well too.
Yeah, and I guess that it kind of fits in that AI world where there are so many use cases. What do you address first? And again, I was reading some material on, look for those use cases that are going to make impact into processes in your business, into areas of your business where you're putting human intensive labor to understand your data. Semaphore can really help in those areas. So yeah. Feel free to reach out and talk to us about that in more detail. But just a sort of like kind of process question really, but does Semaphore duplicate or keep a copy of the data that it processes? I guess that's kind of like a governance question as well, really.
Yeah, I can start with that if you want.
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, basically, is the question. But the Semaphore processes the documents. Where the data goes is a different question. Whether it goes into directly into a BI tool, whether it goes into your content management system. Tagging SharePoint is a big Semaphore use case. Enriching the indexes of search engines is a very big Semaphore use case. And of course, if you toss it into MarkLogic, then you get the best of all those worlds.
Yeah, it's able to store that data and then query that data as well, and actually provide a query that can go right across that data to include structured or unstructured as well as the RDF or graph data. So yeah, really interesting use cases there that can be arisen from that. I guess one of the questions, you kind of touched on it at the end there, but like, how do you get started on a data harmonization project? Stephen, I'll maybe start with you, and then Jim, maybe you can like pick it up.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the best practice I've seen with companies in my experience is they may create an entity like under the CIO or CDO tree where there's basically a taxonomy council or a metadata council, right? So it's a cross-functional group. It has representatives from all your business units, and the idea is, listen, at some point in the company, we have to make the decision of how we're going to talk about things, right? We can't have 9 terms to talk about the same things. Now you can have 9 maybe subways of talking about the same thing, but I have to understand, well, what's the highest level concept? We're going to use the term social security number. We're not going to use employee identification number. We're not going to use a taxpayer identification number. We're going to standardize on the term social security number, right? Like I gave in, during the presentation, right? Now that doesn't mean you can't represent it as other things in your organization, but at least at a high level, we'll say governance level, we're going to use that term. And that's people and process. There wasn't really technology involved with that. And that might be a good segue to Jim, because actually Semaphore does help with the governance piece of the taxonomy space as well too. So Jim, did you want to comment on that as well too?
Yeah, certainly. As I mentioned before, Semaphore's focus is the subject matter experts, the business users. So that modeling component that again we didn't look at, but is designed. It's the number one principle of Semaphore is to be easy to use for subject matter experts. So that's what that tool is all about. And the governance processes are built into it, the workflow, the socialization, being able to pull people that may only care about Semaphore, once every few months or something. We have tools that allow them to quickly um, see these models in a very simple way and make contributions to it. It's definitely a core part of the design to fit in that type of enterprise construct.
Yeah. And I guess, and then the questions just come in here, and I always think of this as like data harmonization as could be a part of a bigger project around MDM. And with Semaphore, do you think that Semaphore is a replacement tool or is it a complementary tool? I kind of know the answers to this because we've done an event before, and I think you guys are involved with it as well. But Stephen, do you want to just quickly?
Yeah, it's a complementary tool, and the way that I separate the two in my head is, MDM. And getting a little data speak here, but MDM really focuses on your instance data. It focuses on the records itself, right? My single source of truth, my social security numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it's not, but you know what I mean. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And it never changed, and I'm tracking that record of data. Semaphore works solely in the metadata space, so it's kind of like the circle, if you will, around it, right? So it says this data item is describing the concept of social security number, but it isn't the data item itself, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I always think about it. Semaphore is strictly your metadata tool. MDM tools are strictly your instance data tool. So that's how I separate it and how they work together.
Yeah. It's interesting because we did like we mentioned that we did a session on this, and with Mark Logic, that circle we call an envelope. So we put that metadata on that envelope, but that data itself is completely unchanged. So you can then make records, and you can keep track of the data and then govern it in that way if you'd like. I've got one more. Let's have a look. So, how does data harmonization integrate with existing data management and analytics systems? Semi-related to MDM, but yeah, how does we integrate with those?
Yeah, it kind of ties into that, doesn't it? Again, back to the idea of being a complementary solution. So the data that Semaphore generates or Semaphore manages can be used kind of independently of a larger systems, but really, and it could feed directly into an analytic system just by analyzing file shares and extracting data and then using that for analytics. But in most cases, it's really part of a kind of an enterprise architecture where there might be a harmonization tier. I think one of Stephen's slides really presented that well, where Semaphore helps to make as a kind of a translation layer, the semantic translation layer that's focused on the concepts, not the specific data. That's another distinction with MDM I would draw, and that if you're looking for social security numbers or market cap, that translation is managed in Semaphore, so that if somebody asks for something in one language, Semaphore can help interpret that and then understand the concept that somebody's searching for, and then use whatever code or term that is used in the systems where the data resides to pull that data back and present it to the user in a unified, harmonized view.
Yeah. And this one's kind of for me, but the Semaphore provides a great UI, one that seems to help bring data harmonized, of course, but to business process experts, so like information engineers, knowledge managers, etc. It is almost a low-code solution. Is that like a deliberate choice, and do you think that's going to continue to evolve in the future in that direction?
I can at least start with the response on that one. So the short answer, long answer, right? The short answer is I always like to make analogies to things, and I kind of think as Semaphore as a crowdsourcing tool, if you're kind of familiar with that, right? Where I'm soliciting knowledge from anyone in my organization, and they're contributing to the knowledge body of my company, right? Well, the sheer fact that it's anybody in my organization, it has to be basically zero code, right? Because it has to be accessible by anyone, and that's by design. And Semaphore was always kind of fundamentally designed that way so that I can put it in the hands of anyone in the company. They don't have to know a line of programming. It's all GUI based. Now there is a very robust API under the covers. So if you're trying to do sophisticated integration work, or you're just more of like a power user, you can access the API. But really the intent is we can put this power in the hands of anyone, and they can leverage it.
Yeah. And Jim, I guess from your perspective, it's great because, like I say, from a technical point of view, it removes that burden, and you can really start asking conversations around that. What is your data? How is your data stored? What does it mean to you? Those type of questions.
Yeah, I think it's a good contrast with traditional MDM tools as well that are designed for the enterprise architect, not for the end user.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I think we've covered most of the questions. If we haven't got to your question, or if you have got more questions, then please feel free to reach out to us. We have Stephen and Jim's email is just there for you to have a look at there. So please reach out to them. Try and give them some good questions. They like good questions.
The hard ones.
Yeah, give them the thinkers. We've got more information on our website. There's a QR code there. I've also put a link in the chat. Coming up in March, we briefly talked about AI here, and we've mentioned it before, but we've got an AI roundtable. That's that second QR code and a link that I've just put in the chat for you there. That's on the 7th of March. That's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're going right across the sort of Mark Logic and Semaphore solution, maybe looking at other technologies and how they integrate and things like that, talking about where we're going, why we're doing it, what we're seeing with customers. So if you want to sign up to that, please feel free to do so. But with that, it's thanks to Stephen and Jim. Really looking forward to chatting with you again soon, hopefully. Please feel free to check out the website, look at webinars that are coming up, including our new community event, which we're planning for next month. But with that, that is it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.